If you missed it, let's take stock of some of the big takeaways from the week gone by in Paris and bring in SABC News sports researcher Janet Whitton, who's with us here in Studio 9 at the SABC's headquarters. Janet, great to see you. Thanks for popping by.
No problem.
And off air, I was asking you, where do we start? Because there's just so much to talk about. But I watched the race last night, as I'm sure you did too. And there was a point where I had to look away because it was just too tight, and I don't really deal that well with that kind of anxiety. But my goodness, what a race it was yesterday.
It was a fantastic race, actually. And on the performance from the semi-finals, I think Tatjana and everybody else knew Kate Douglas was going to be the person that she needed to beat, which she didn't manage to do. She's going to be a great talent for the future. I think Kate Douglas is going to be around for a while. But what was so fantastic, I think, and we were also mentioning it off air, is Tatjana's reactions. She came second, and she's genuinely happy for Kate Douglas. And I think that not only were we kind of a little bit disappointed as fans, we were hoping for the double gold, but I think that she's just such an extraordinary role model for how to deal with those situations, how to deal with pressure. She's the nicest person you will ever meet, and I have met her a couple of times, and she really is like that. She's like that all the time. So those reactions that you see are really genuine. So she's a fantastic role model of somebody who can be a nice person and be a really tough competitor at the same time.
Gracious but tough. I think that's what someone has once said about her, describing just her temperament. And in fact, in her, what do you call it, post-match interview, post-race interview, she actually made a mistake and said, it was really nice getting a bronze medal. And then she said, oh, sorry, it's a silver. And it was such another cute moment because you almost get a sense that to her, it's not really about winning. It's about what comes with being part of a sporting code and representing the country.
She's had quite a difficult 3 years since the Tokyo Games, because of course the Tokyo Games were delayed a year, and I think that threw out a lot of people, like the swimmers and the athletes, who were kind of peaking towards 2020, and then suddenly they had to wait a year before they could compete. And it's been kind of an up and down year for her. She hasn't competed a lot. She wasn't sure how she was feeling coming into this. So coming into the Games, yes, she was kind of the favorite, but everybody knew it wasn't going to be that easy. And I think she is one of those people who's genuinely pleased. She's like, I did the best that I could. Somebody did better than me, and good for her. But I'm very comfortable with the fact that I did the best that I could. I'm very comfortable with the fact that I've done the best that I can in my career, and now I'm ready to move on, as you mentioned. And she will move on from the greatest high. I mean, a gold and a silver from the Olympic Games, again, is nothing to be sneezed at.
Did you expect that, by the way, that announcement? I mean, she's only 27, guys. Unless I'm in the wrong career, but to leave at 27 for some people might feel a bit early. It
might feel a little bit early, but for some of the swimmers, maybe not. And don't forget, she's just gotten married. She's now Siya Kolisi's sister-in-law. So it's very cute. The Kolisi kids all call her Auntie Tatjana on social media. It's very sweet. But I think that she's ready now to kind of move on to the next phase of her life, which is a family. She doesn't want to wait another 5 years before she actually does that. And I think that's the focus. She hasn't spoken specifically about that, but it is, if you know her Christianity is very important to her, so she does a lot of work, around that kind of thing as well. And she's ready to just kind of move on to the next phase of her life. Her whole life doesn't revolve around swimming.
Sure. Wow. Imagine. And she still happens to be one of the best swimmers in the world.
Exactly.
And this is not a priority.
Amazing.
We can only wish sometimes. All right, so where does this put South Africa? Medal-wise, I mean, I think it's a great start in Paris so far. Can we expect any other medals, perhaps from the other sporting codes?
You know, I think that the mountain biking medal that Alan Hatherley won proves to us, yes, we knew that he was one of the best in the world, and he was always kind of penciled in as a possible medalist. But the fact that he actually went out and got one was amazing. So there are a couple more that are penciled in. I hate to put more pressure on Akani Simbine, because I can't think of anybody who I feel more sorry for in terms of the international stage, because there is no question that Akani Simbine is one of the best sprinters in the world over the last 10 years, and he's got essentially nothing to show for it. He's got fourth places and fifth places at the Olympic Games and at the World Championships ad nauseum. I think they're 9 fourth and fifth places altogether. He's run under 10 seconds 40 times in international competitions, which is more than most people. But he hasn't got anything to show for it. And he's feeling very confident. And we mentioned earlier about the fact that Tatjana's got something outside of swimming to focus on. Akani has done that in the last 4 years. He was so disappointed after Tokyo. He thought that was his last chance, and he took a step back. He fell into quite a heavy depression, and he's come out of it saying, yes, athletics is the biggest part of my life, but it's not the only part of my life. It's not what defines me. And I think he sounds a lot happier and a lot more relaxed. So I'm hoping that at least a bronze medal. And then, of course, the relay team, he came in and carried the flag at the opening ceremony, and then went straight back to Montpellier, where the relay team has been training for the last week.
Yeah.
Well, they've been there for a couple of weeks, actually. So the relay team are also penciled in. We have a good relay record, and I think that maybe the relays will show something. You know, there's outside chances in things like cycling. So our road cyclists are good, but it's going to depend on how good other people are on the day. The golf is underway at the moment. Eric van Rooyen is only 4 shots off the pace, which means golf is one of those sports where they say you can lose it on the first day, but you can't win it. He hasn't lost it yet, so he's still in a position where he could actually win if he plays well over today and over the next.
Still very much in the game, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
You know, you speak about Akani Simbine, and you know, it's one thing being good at the sport, and it's another to be able to show up on the day, which I think is what kind of separates people who are just, you know, talented and to stars, quite frankly. You know, for Tatjana to perform when the stakes are so high, I think also says a lot. And I think perhaps that's part of the conversation that we don't often speak about. I'm reminded of one of the relay matches, you reminded me which tournament it was, where we dropped the baton. Yes. And, you know, few people have forgotten that. And my heart goes out to them, because performing on the day when the stakes are so high is also nothing to be scoffed at.
I think that was a big lesson, that dropping the baton thing. Yeah, it was, and we were doing so well. We were like right in there with the leaders in that particular race. And I think that Athletics South Africa has learned, which is why the relay camp is actually taking place at the moment. They need to focus on the relays. We've got a really good bunch of sprinters at the moment. Akani's not the only. It's not Akani and 3 others at the moment. There's a really good bunch of sprinters at the top. Akani and Benji Richardson and Sean Masongani, who will form part of the core of that relay squad, are all running they've all qualified for the 100 meters as well. So we've got a really good bunch of sprinters there, and Athletics South Africa realized that. So they've put a lot of focus on both the relays, both the 4x1 and the 4x4. So let's hold thumbs that the training and the practice means no dropped batons.
Yeah, gosh, I'm already getting nervous, and we haven't even started the race yet. But of course, there's so much else taking place in Paris. In fact, you know, Paris has been in the news for sometimes all the wrong reasons, even in the lead up to the Olympics itself. And I wonder to what extent you reckon all those issues are featuring in the Olympic story, right? The Seine, for example, has come into sharp focus because of moments where apparently protesters were doing things in the river that they probably shouldn't be doing. And there's also been all kinds of commentary around the opening ceremony, and Christian groups worried about, you know, moments of blasphemy, as it were. Do you think organizers are worried about all of that?
You know, I get the impression that the French we're French, and this is the way we are, and if you have a problem with it, that's your problem, not ours, kind of thing, which I think is probably the only way that you can deal with these kind of things. But the 2 aspects that you talked about there, first of all, the opening ceremony. Personally, I think the problem with the opening ceremony was actually the lack of explanation while the ceremony was on. If it was explained clearly, if the various commentators in all of the different countries had been given proper commentary sheets, in a sense, and explained at the time that this is a depiction of the Feast of Dionysus and not any, and there's nothing religious about it. I mean, the French are famous for art and being a little bit flamboyant and all the rest of it. And it kind of makes sense. And if it had been explained at the time, then that kind of criticism wouldn't have kind of run away in this era of social media the way that it did. I wasn't crazy about the opening ceremony, but I think the reaction has been, you know, from a lot of people who are choosing to read it the way they want to read it instead of the way that it was actually intended. And then you mentioned the River Seine, and that comes into 2 things, actually. It comes into security, which has been touch wood, relatively successful now. That was the thing that the Paris organisers were most concerned about, and particularly with the opening ceremony, it being open air on the river the way that it was. So far, they've kind of managed to handle it quite well. For certain things have got through. There was the small panic on Friday morning with the attacks on the trains, but nothing really since then. The River Seine, though, the pollution has been an issue for ever since the idea came about that we were going to do the triathlon swimming and the open water swimming in the Seine. And there have been lots of thunderstorms in Paris this week. Every night there's been a thunderstorm. There was one during the opening ceremony.
I was about to say, it was raining during the opening ceremony, yeah.
And that doesn't help with the pollution. It's just kind of churning up the water, and it's making the currents a little bit stronger in the Seine as well, which doesn't really help. They had this very expensive plan to kind of clean up the Seine, which they've been doing over the last few months. In fact, over the last couple of years, and I don't think it quite came right with the weather that came in. And I think the problem there was that there wasn't really a plan B. They knew that this was a problem, but they didn't really plan for them not being able to solve the problem.
Sure.
And I think that was possibly a mistake that they made. But eventually we saw the two triathlons taking place on the same day. The open water swimming is also supposed to take place on the same, so they need to keep it clean for a few more days.
And we hope they do, because there's still so much to happen in Paris. And you and I could speak until the Olympics wrap up. So, Janet, thank you for coming. Lovely chatting to you. And yeah, let's make this a thing. Maybe we'll see you next week Friday to catch up on what's taken place in the past week as well. Janet Whitton, of course, SABC News Sports researcher, helping us think about the many different issues around what's taking place in Paris, as we also take stock of our recent win from Tatjana Smith.